And everyone, impromptu live stream just to fill in some details on what broke this evening around the Red Bull, not the Red Bull conversation from this morning, but the Red Bull update that's come out from Phil Hay on the Athletic. I'm going to
my microphone this time. There we go. How's everyone doing? Hope we're all feeling great. Some updates on this. There have been some questions that have gone out today around this. What does it mean? Future possibilities. Are we going to be called Red Bull Leeds? Blah, blah, blah. And as the title of the video suggests, Marathe has already answered those questions this evening. He spoke to Phil Hay in the Athletic after the information around the, I almost said takeover. That's how in my head it is since yesterday. The investment in the club and the sponsorship deal around the club. So there's a couple of bits. This is an impromptu live news video. I'm on later on with Joe Wayman on his show at 9 o'clock tonight to talk about this in more detail. But I wanted to give people just to ease things. I would say this. Whatever is happening around the Red Bull stuff, good news or bad news, it is important to keep an eye on what they could potentially do. They are minority stakeholders at this point. I'm pretty happy about what this will look like in the short term or on the face of things, but that doesn't mean that long term things can change, and things can change. 49ers were once a minority stakeholder in Leeds United. They now own the club, but there are some things just to keep an eye on, but I wouldn't try to baby out with the bathwater just yet. And there's some bits to come to cover off with this, so I'll get into it. So Phil basically asked Prague how this all came about and why the 49ers feel that having Red Bull at the table or at Elland Road was a good idea, why they did it. And he said that they're basically, it wasn't a case the club was looking for further capital. It wasn't a case the club was looking for further investment. It wasn't a case the club was even looking for a shirt sponsor, but there was conversations around what Red Bull bring to football and outside that sport in general. Red Bull were keen on a conversation. Oliver Mitzlaff was keen on a conversation. 49ers were keen on a conversation. So what they did, they had a conversation. They basically said, what would this even look like? What's in it for everybody? What do you want? What do we want? What do we see coming out of this? And he said that they're very aware of the sensitivities that are around this. And I've got some quotes that we'll go through. I've thrown this together, so if I'm a little bit off in reading these, bear with me, because I haven't had a chance really to go through this in much detail. But yeah, they won't be changing the name to Red Bull Leeds anytime soon, if ever, because it's very hard to do that in the UK, and that's the bottom line. Hull tried to change the name to Hull City Tigers, and that was rejected by the FA. It has to go through the FA. It won't happen in England. Currently, anyway, it wouldn't happen. So anyway, moving on. So basically, he said that Red Bull have an awful lot to invest inside sport in general. You look at their scouting network, their data teams, all of the stuff that they do, their enhancement programs in athletes as well to make athletes better. All of that stuff they've done around sport is all positive. I mean, they're an energy drink company who became a global sports entity. So there's some positives in that. Their history isn't great when it comes to football clubs. People have likened some of the stuff they did with Leipzig to what they did in Formula One as well, but Formula One teams get sold on a regular basis. I was a Jordan fan back in the day, and that got bought by Honda, became Honda. So things change in that situation. So not necessarily the same. Asked about why he said this, he basically said, look, we looked at it. What would something look like? We had questions for them. Why did they want to get involved with Leeds? Why did Leeds want to get involved with them? Questions on both sides. And he said they could have invested in any other English club, but they didn't. They wanted to invest in Leeds. They chose Leeds. He said it's minority because that they're a minority partner. And the reason they've taken a stake in the club as well is because they recognize the potential further opportunities that Leeds have globally and how big Leeds could be. And they also believe that they have a good management structure in place at the club, and they believe in that as well. The partnership leads to a bigger profile globally for Leeds United. It means the global revenue and possible global sponsorships as well that can come in from that as well. And it means more money for buying players and also more money for keeping players. When Prague talked a couple of days ago about the capital the club had going into this season, we now understand where some of that confidence was maybe coming from. He was asked basically what's their stake in the club, what have they taken, and what does my minority actually look like? And Parag just said it's a minority stake in line with the other minority stakeholders. Of the minority stakeholders, there are a certain group who have invested slightly more than the other minority ones, and they're in that bracket of people who've invested a little bit more. But the big questions are and will continue to be, when are you changing the name to Red Bull? That's what he's covered off here. So in this piece here, basically he said, asked about the whole part about this. He said, I wouldn't say it was a concern. It's definitely something that I wanted to address. I'm not talking about whatever their positive or negative history is. I'm talking about understanding our history and the understanding and respecting our legacy. So, for example, this club will forever be Leeds United Football Club. It's not going to be Leeds Red Bulls. To be fair, they understand that, they appreciate that, they respect that, they know the legacy of this club. So it's not something they wanted either. But for me, that was table stakes. That's not going to happen. It's pretty definitive statement there. Hey, if Red Bull want to pay for the name of this channel, they can pay for the name of this channel. Other sponsorship opportunities are available also, I should say. Moving on to the next piece on this, but Marathe, he said the only way this partnership was going to come to fruition was their recognition that as a minority investor, just as with the others, they're there to lend advice when I need it, but it's our group's management of this club and my leadership of this club. Let me say it again. That's not going to change. This is a minority and a minority only partnership. On the sensitivities, we wouldn't have done this deal if it wasn't significant for us. It could be the difference between saving a player from being sold or signing a player. Hey, asked him, do those same red lines apply to shirt color, stadium naming rights, and so on? The things Red Bull has changed elsewhere. Marathe said, listen, anything with Ellen Road is just not on my radar whatsoever. It's not contemplated, and it's never been part of the discussion. I recognize, and I've been in sports too long to know that these stadiums are hallowed ground. Not to talk about something that happened a year ago when a group of, including then outgoing Leeds chairman Andre Rajasani, floated the idea of using Ellen Road as security. But that was something that was so ridiculous to me, not recognizing the connection with the fans, with their club and their temple. As far as their logos go, you've seen it before. We'll see how it ends up developing. Yes, they do have their sponsorship and logos with Bulls and things like that. And this club has had a shirt sponsor in the past who had red on it. Red is a contentious colour at Leeds. I understand the sensitivities of that, and I want supporters to know that my focus is on keeping the legacy of this great club, doing everything we can to make it as competitive as we can on the pitch. Moving on. Does Red Bull understand that, though? It's a great question by Phil. Do they get it? Do they understand that it's a non-negotiable from your perspective? Marathe said, yes, definitely. I want to give them credit. It was never a battle or a debate. It warmed my heart a little bit because they could have picked any club to purchase, but they picked Leeds United because they recognize their potential. Hay went on to ask, your own takeover started as a minority investor and proceeded towards a full buyout. How can you reassure people who wonder whether this ultimately where it's going to lead? Red Bull starting as a minority but taking a major stake. I'll put that in twice. Marathe, when we invested with Andrea, as you know, we saw we had the option to purchase control for a prescribed period of time. It was also part of the picture when we first looked at minority investment. This was a potential opportunity if we so wanted to be. That's not the case in this. This is a minority partnership where they're very happy to be an investor in the club and see the club grow under my leadership. That's not going to change. And then Marathe, I can imagine, I don't want to say confusion. This was Phil A's. What do you imagine the reaction of the fans will be to this? And he said, I can imagine, and I don't want to say confusion, but maybe some eyebrows raised. Wait a second. What does this mean? What's going to happen? Is our name going to change? Is it going to suddenly be turned into giving them control? None of that is true or accurate, but I can understand that those will be the questions, which is why I wanted to make sure I talked about this. I hope that after unpeeling the onion a bit, fans will see this is about bringing resources to the club and help us to be more competitive on the pitch without sacrificing the integrity and the purity of what Leeds United is all about. And we can have a look at some questions, points, thoughts. That's the wrong thing. We go, there we are. How are we? So yeah, so basically all the questions that everyone was wondering about, are they going to change the name? Are they coming in as a minority stakeholder to ultimately become a major investor at some point and take over the club? Are they going to change the name of the ground? Are we going to be called Red Bull Leeds? Is red going to be integrated into the colour? It should be specified Leeds have worn red before. Yes, it was in the 70s, 60s, 70s, whenever. They did wear maroon jersey, which you can call it maroon if you want, but it's pretty close to red. They did wear that as well. Red Kite was a sponsor, which was actually in red. Part of it was in red. Going back to the League One days, 32 red, although they never coloured it in red, but had the name red on the shirt. Does that Spurs fans have the same feeling around their shirt sponsors towards AIA? around the red being synonymous with Arsenal, and they don't want that. So these sensitivities are out there. So it's great to see that they've said they're not changing the stadium name. There's no plan. They're a minority stakeholder who doesn't have an option to buy an increased stake in the club. The difference between them and the 49ers was the 49ers bought the club. They had a option to buy the club later on down the line. Red Bull don't. Are they going to change the kit colours? No. Are they going to have their name on the kit outside of the sponsorship? No. Is the badge going to change? For Red Bull? No. That doesn't mean a badge change won't happen ultimately, but Red Bull in the name and the Bulls won't happen. So he's pretty much tried to be as he was the other day, as open and transparent with this as he could possibly be, to share the information so that people know that all of your concerns are being heard. We know what's being said. We know what's going on. Here are the answers that you've been looking for. It's a sponsorship investment. If you take what they did at Leipzig, so for those who don't know, they bought over Leipzig, who were a smaller club, third division in Germany, and they renamed the club. Changed the club colours, went into a municipal stadium that was close by, that was in the same town, renamed it, and they tried to delete the entire history of the club and tried to refound the club from 2005. That wasn't allowed to be happen ultimately, and they had to roll back a little bit. They're not allowed to call the club Red Bull Leipzig because of conditions of rules in that country, so they called them RB Leipzig instead. Some people in Germany will say that they've been a positive influence because they've added another team to the competitive landscape of German football. So it's not just two clubs. There's three involved in that. They did a slightly bigger change in Salzburg. From Salzburg, less of a big deal. With Leeds, it would be seen as a much bigger deal. But from what we can see here, you're not going to have red on the shirt. Or a shirt in red. You're not going to have the name and the title. You're not going to have the badge changed to be Red Bull Leeds. Ellen Road is not going to become Red Bull Stadium. Although Boost have a fairly sizable marketing campaign around Ellen Road. The entire, I think it's John Charles is completely covered in Boost logos. That will be replaced by Red Bull. So you will see a huge amount of Red Bull branding in the ground, but that's literally just replacing what was there with Boost. So again, it's like for like, it's sponsorship, it's revenue. They're going to want to see their name everywhere to get what they want out of this. They're also becoming the new partner in terms of drinks partner for the club as well. So that will happen. So there's an awful lot of things. They did erase Salzburg history. They won't be allowed to do that here. And that's the whole point of this clarity. So if you just joined the stream now, go back and check it from the start. We've covered the questions that have been asked to Parag Marathe around this from Phil Hay at The Athletic. An exclusive interview that they have done this evening. And basically from the update from this morning, nobody needs to worry right now. Right now, there's no option to buy Leeds in their deal. It is a small thing. Is this a Trojan horse? Hank, as I've said already in the video, go back and listen to the start if you want to, and we've covered it here. They don't have an option to buy. When the 49ers took over and bought into Leeds as minority, they did have an option to buy. Red Bull do not have an option to buy. They're in the minority pool. That's it. The deal is rumored to be worth 300 million or close to 300 million. Sorry, 200 million over 3 years is what the deal is supposed to be worth, which is quite an awful lot. It's about, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. You add them into the investment pool and it puts Leeds in the top, well into the top 6 in the Premier League in terms of revenue. So if we do get back there, there's that there as well. And as Parag Marathe has said, this does go a long way to helping us sign players and keep players. So might not have to do some of the stuff that we've had to do before. Michael's asking, Jerry, even though Red Bull don't have the option to buy further into Leeds, could that change? Parag Marathe has said no. No plan for that to change. None. And again, if you go back a little bit, you'll see the quotes that I put on the page. They're direct from the interview as well. What else have we got question-wise? Max Verstappen for corners. Can he take it? He can. He's all right. Yeah. They will essentially be sitting next to Larry Nance. They're in the minority pool, although they're in the upper end of the minority pool, but they're still in the minority pool. They do not have a seat at the board. They do not have any voting rights, and they do not have any decision-making power here at all. Marathe has been very clear to say that it is his management team that are running the club, and they're aware of that, and they're okay with this. 49ers won't be owners forever. No, they won't, Scally. They definitely won't be. And that's the whole venture capitalist model, isn't it? You take it over, you have it for a bit, and you sell it for a profit. They will sell it down the road. Maybe they do sell to Red Bull, but there is a football regulator being brought into England in the next couple of years whose entire purpose is to stop commercial entities from repackaging clubs and stopping clubs from being changed names. Also, there's existing rules within Leeds, within England, that will stop them doing what they did. And also, Leeds is a single city club. If they do change anything, there's going to be the fans that hit the streets and there'll be protests outside the ground. Leeds have ran owners out of the club before. They'll do it again. They're aware of that. They are aware of that. But I do understand all the concerns, by the way. I'm not trying to diminish the concerns that everyone has. There should be concerns. We should keep an eye on this. We shouldn't necessarily take them at their absolute word. But I do trust Prag Marathe and what he's doing in the short term. And right now, there's no opportunity for them to buy any more stake in the club than they've currently got. They could probably increase their investment, but that won't give them any control over the club. The ground won't be changed. You might see some commercial entity stuff done at the ground now that weren't done before. Red Bull monster trucks, halftime monster trucks at Ellen Road. That's what we want to see. That's what we want. But yeah, but in terms of all the big stuff that we're all worried about, there's no name change, no kit change, no badge change, nothing they can do there. Their name will be on the front of the shirt, whether it's in red or in blue and white. They have done color schemes with blue and white and silver and yellow before. They might do that then this time again. It's the iconic logo they're looking for rather than the color scheme. Possibly that's a possible thing that you will see. But I do get the concerns, and we should be mindful of them. But I do think Prag Marathe has gone a long way today to alleviate some of those concerns. And just to point out that can kids have Red Bull shirts on? Yes, they can, because it's not an alcoholic beverage. It's a soft drink, so that the rules don't apply to that. But a decent question. Good question. Daryl's happy with the investment. Shebang, what percentage of the club do they own? They won't give you a percentage. They just say it's a minority stakeholding in the investment pool. So this isn't the same as a normal stakeholder where someone owns 60%. Let's say Arsenal, someone owns 80% of Arsenal, someone else owns 10, 25. There's an investment pool that owns the club and is managed by a board who also have senior investors, the likes of Marathe, the likes of the rest of the names. I got him. The man that owns the shopping chain, the Australian guy as well, Pete Lowy. They're in the bigger group, and they're ones that are sitting at the board room table making these decisions. So they're not there. Red Bull are not at that table, are not in that position, won't be able to do that. Yeah. Should we point out they changed the history of a German club? They attempted to change the history of a German club, and they shouldn't have done that. They really shouldn't have done that. But they did it. It's in the past, but hopefully they've learned from that. You'd hope anyway, wouldn't you? Anything else? The 49ers terms with Red Bull simply strengthen their hand if and when they want to see the club. If Red Bull makes the move to buy, there'll be no move to made to buy. It'll only be if the club is being sold that possibly comes up. But that's so far down the line. They have no intention of selling this club anytime soon. They view Leeds as a long-term investment, and they view Leeds as being worth in the billions. Where Leeds are right now, we are not worth in the billions. We are still in the hundreds of millions, the early hundreds of millions. So Leeds would want to get higher up for that to happen. That's important to point out there as well. Rebel massive player pool. That is something the Prag Marathe alleviated to, was that the fact that they have this huge scouting network, this data pool, all of this kind of stuff. But there isn't a connection between Leeds and any of the Red Bull clubs. That has been specified as well. There is no interlinking between the clubs. There is no player sharing between the clubs. They are separate entities from the club, and that's an important thing to say. Red Bull don't have a member on the board. They don't have a seat at the board. They don't have any decision-making powers or any voting rights. None. Absolutely none. And they have been interested in Leeds for a long, long time. A long, long time. It's a big club. We know that. Just not a big club in terms of its league position. But all that is stuff to come. So I hope that this has alleviated some of the fears around this investment, around the sponsorship, around what could potentially come. As I say, I'm very positive about this right now. I will remain positive for the short term. Longer term, it's very important to keep an eye on what Red Bull do. It is important. But as I said, there are so many regulations around it in the UK. For them to attempt to even try and do what they did in Germany and in Austria, it just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. They won't get away with it. The rules, as I said, go back to the one about Hull City trying to add the word Tigers to a badge that already had a tiger on it. It wasn't a massive identity shift. FA voted no. Can't do it. You're not getting it. End of story. So that's all before the regulator comes in. So the huge positives of this investment simply dwarf the nitpicky negatives that people are coming up with. I'm all for it. I don't think the negatives are nitpicky. And that's important to say. I've watched the Square Ball this morning, and I've watched Michael Normanton's his facial reactions outside of what he said about it. And he's not comfortable with this. Neither is Dan. And I would be the same. Initially, I looked at this and went, you don't buy a small stake if you're like Red Bull unless you're going to follow through at some point. And that should be there. But that isn't for today and tomorrow. That's for much further down the line. Right now, Prag Marathe is saying that the club is protected, that there's nothing that will change. He's very aware of this. He's aware of the stadium sensitivities. He's aware of the red sensitivities. He's aware of all of that. This gives Leeds huge investment that they can put into players. It's, what did I say, 200 million over 3 years. So it's just under 60 million a year, which is a huge amount of money in the championship. It's the biggest ever. But I wanted to just make sure everyone had all the facts before they kind of came to a decision on how they feel about this, but I would definitely keep an eye on it. Anyway, folks, that's going to be for me, an impromptu one. Back tomorrow morning with the news on Joe Wayman's show at 9 o'clock over in Just Joe's show to talk about this in more detail. And the podcast is back tomorrow night as well. So I will talk to you then. Have a great remainder of your evening. You can check out the rest of today's news video in the list if you want to check them out as well. Talk to you later. See you. Bye.